At 21 years old, Mary Virginia Carpenter boarded a train on June 1, 1948, leaving her home in Texarkana, Texas, to travel 6 hours to Denton. She was carrying a black hat box, a matching makeup case, and a brown steamer trunk. During the journey, she met Marjorie Webster, another Texarkana native, who was also headed to Texas State College for Women, now Texas Women's University. The two women struck up a conversation, as they shared the same destination. Virginia had previously studied journalism at the University of Arkansas but decided to switch to science in order to pursue her dream of becoming a lab technician. She had originally enrolled at TSCW for the 1945 to 1946 academic year but had to leave to care for her ailing mother. Virginia was the only child left to care for her mother after her father passed away when she was just 15. One advantage of staying home was that she was able to save more money for her studies. After attending Texarkana Junior College for a while, Virginia ultimately chose to enroll at TSCW for the summer term of 1948. In the fall, she intends to start her training as a lab technician. Virginia and Marjorie decided to ride together in the taxi to campus at the station. By the time they got there, though, the 21-year-old remembered she hadn't checked on her bags, so she asked Edgar Ray Jack Zachary, the cab driver, how much it would cost to travel back to the train station. When Marjorie asked Virginia whether she wanted to travel back with her, she replied, "No. I'll go alone. I'll be okay." As a result, the two parted ways, with Virginia heading back to the station. It was then that she realized her luggage was still missing. A station worker informed her that her trunk would be delayed. The taxi driver, Jack Zachary, assured her he would return to pick it up in the morning. Virginia consented to give him her station. It was when Virginia got at the university's Brackenridge Hall. It was about 9:30 p.m. Zachary, who was 20 years old, reportedly told the police that he got out of the taxi and went up to two men who were waiting outside a convertible car that was either yellow or cream in color. Zachary stated that one of the men was tall and the other was chubby, and the car was maybe a Pontiac. Virginia apparently recognized them. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised to see them. As they began talking, Zachary left. The following morning, he retrieved Virginia's steamer trunk and set it down on the front lawn of the building. Although he maintained that she had instructed him to leave it there the previous evening, the university's Dean of Women pointed out that it was quite uncommon for a student's luggage to be left on the lawn as opposed to being delivered to their door before staff members ultimately took the trunk in. It was left out on the grass for 2 days. In the meantime, Kenny Branham, Virginia's boyfriend, called her mother to inform her that he hadn't spoken to the 21-year-old in 3 days. This was not like the usual. When her mother Hazel got in touch with the college, she found out that Virginia hadn't enrolled. Virginia quickly contacted her friends and family, but none had seen her. Concerned, Hazel filed a missing persons report, prompting a search. Detectives tracked Virginia's last known movements and spoke with Jack Zachary, the cab driver, who described the vehicle as yellow or cream. A young man, whose girlfriend attended TSCW, was identified as the car's owner. The couple reported seeing the two men walking near the car, but they didn't observe any interaction between them and Virginia. It was determined that neither the young man nor his girlfriend had anything to do with the 21-year-old's disappearance. A gas station attendant in the Texas city of Aubrey believed he saw Virginia in a yellow convertible 2 days after she vanished. A young woman and 2 men were with her. Then on June 11th, at a bus stop in DeQueen, Arkansas, a ticket agent noticed a young woman who looked like Virginia. She appeared anxious as she waited at the station, apparently chewing her lip and peering out the doors after getting off a bus from Texarkana. After Virginia was seen leaving with an older man, believed to be in his mid-20s, an agent received a call from a woman asking if Virginia Carpenter was present. However, the agent didn't make the connection until the next day when she saw the news about Virginia's disappearance. After recognizing the young woman in a photo, the agent immediately contacted the police but later questioned whether she had correctly identified Virginia. Additionally, in Cerro Negro, Texas, another woman who resembled Virginia was reported to have been seen. Many more sightings of Virginia have been reported across the nation. Not one of them, not even the ones that were just named, has ever been verified. Investigators pondered whether Virginia had ran off with another lover, and a number of Virginia's previous partners conjecture that this was likely the case because they saw how readily she fell in love. Nonetheless, her family thought the 21-year-old wouldn't walk away silently. Prior to her disappearance, Virginia was engaged, but she ended the relationship a few weeks before the wedding. Kenny Branham, Virginia's boyfriend at the time, passed a polygraph test, which led law enforcement to clear him of suspicion due to the results and his lack of motive. Despite a large-scale search involving wooded areas, creeks, storm drains, and abandoned wells, authorities were unable to find any trace of Virginia. Boats and airplanes were deployed in the search, but no evidence of her was found. Her handbag remained missing, and her trunk provided no further clues regarding her disappearance. Since they were unable to identify a motive for Virginia's escape, law enforcement did not think that she fled on her own. She didn't owe anyone money, had no criminal record, and no envious ex-boyfriends or lovers to flee with. Additionally, she was not pregnant based on the results of her most recent medical examination, which was conducted not long before she vanished. A 3x1 wooden box was discovered in a smokehouse close to an abandoned farmhouse on October 18, 1959, approximately 7.5 miles northeast of Jefferson, Texas. There were human remains within, in particular, a woman's skeletal remains. The bones found did not match Virginia's teeth, despite the fact that they belonged to a Caucasian woman with a shorter leg, a trait that Virginia shared. Jack Zachary, the taxi driver who had driven Virginia the day she disappeared, remains under investigation as a potential suspect. Known for his violent and abusive tendencies, Zachary had a history of minor offenses. In 1957, he was accused of attempting to rape a woman, but the victim chose not to press charges, leading to the dismissal of the case. Even though Zachary's wife provided an alibi for him that night, saying he was with her starting at 10 p.m., she ultimately came out 10 years later and denied having given it to him. He acknowledged that he hadn't really been home until 2 or 3 in the morning, but she still maintained that he had been abusive to her and had made her make up an alibi. Zachary was never ruled out in connection with Virginia's case, despite the fact that he was questioned multiple times and passed 2 polygraph exams. 1984 saw his death. He was not connected to the disappearance by any hard evidence. There is a theory that Virginia was the victim of the Texarkana Phantom Killer, the same person who killed 5 young people in Texarkana and its environs in 1946, largely in lovers' lanes, during the Moonlight Killings. 3 of the victims were familiar with Virginia, yet there is no concrete evidence linking her to the Phantom Killer's crimes. In 1998, a man came forward, claiming that Virginia was raped and murdered by 2 men shortly after her disappearance. He alleged that her body had been buried in a stock tank near the university's campus, specifically in a dam. However, despite a thorough search of the area, no remains or evidence were found to support this claim. By this point, both of the men who were identified as the culprits had passed away and were never made public. On June 1, 1948, at roughly 9:30 p.m., Mary Virginia Carpenter, then 21 years old, was last seen outside Brackenridge Hall at the Texas State College for Women in Denton. She is described as a 5'3", 120-pound white woman with brown hair and brown eyes. She limps from a past bone infection in her right hip and has an appendectomy scar on her abdomen. When May vanished, she was recovering from a severe sunburn and was known by the name Jimmy. Her last known appearance featured her in a white dress adorned with stripes of brown, red, and green, and silver buttons running down the front. She wore a white straw hat with a flipped-up brim, a feather at the back, red leather platform shoes with a high heel, and a gold watch. She also had a crimson purse with her. If she is still alive, Virginia would be 94 years old today. If you're fascinated by Unsolved Mysteries and enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to stay updated on all our latest content. Moving on to the next mystery. In November 2018, the InSight rover touched down on Mars close to the red planet's equator. NASA's robot has been testing the planet's topographical characteristics and assessing its seismic activity. Its goal is to comprehend and learn about the geology of rocky planets in order to track their evolution and learn more about the past and possible future of Earth. From Earth alone, scientists are unable to get adequate information about rocky worlds. They need to gather information from others. InSight landed in the Elysium Planitia, a small crater located on a volcanic plain. This location is often caught in wind and dust storms. The data it has gathered so far suggests that the seismic activity and magnetic field on Mars are much stronger than the researchers estimated, about 10 times more. While collecting data, the rover recorded a strange humming sound that researchers and experts have not been able to concretely identify the cause of. They have their speculations, though, and suggest it is caused by both seismic movement below the surface as well as the wind above it. When combined together, these two forces create a strange sound. They actually cannot be heard by humans. It falls outside our frequency range but gets picked up on readings by the robot and its machines. So any future human visitors will not be able to hear Mars humming. The researchers are excited at finding so many similarities between Mars and Earth. The infrasound, sound we can't hear, and the atmospheric turbulence are encouraging to their studies on finding out Mars' history and seeing what its timeline looks like compared to ours. Interestingly enough, Earth also has a faint infrasound humming to it. There have been reports of that have been a hot debate for many years, even outside the astronomy community. Scientists can't really explain it, but many people try to blame it for certain diseases and health issues. There have been many locations across Earth that have complained of some sort of noise pollution and mysterious humming sounds. Now, InSight has identified a similar one on Mars. The robot was using a seismometer to measure the quakes underneath the planet. Since its first reading, it has measured over 400 quakes. It even managed to find fault lines on Mars, which confirms the constant seismic activity found. A few of the quakes have registered at 3 to 4 magnitudes, but most of them were so small that the machines and scientists were unable to detect their origin. Researchers also found that there are more quakes on Mars when the planet gets cold. When it cools down, it contracts, which forces the brittle layers near the surface to break in a way to accommodate their positioning. This breaking is causing stress on the surface that results in quakes. There are still many mysteries that the InSight researchers are excited about delving into, like how they recorded some type of activity at Mars' depth. They believe there might even be hot magma still at its core. They will continue to measure the activity and gather as much knowledge about Mars' geological history as possible. Moving on to the next mystery. Because it is the cryptid that most closely resembles humans, Bigfoot is one of the most fascinating cryptos available. People have been reporting sightings with these mysterious creatures for years, and they have photographic proof and tracks to prove it. But it's also renowned for sparking thought-provoking conversations. While some believe that humanoids only exist in tiny groups, others have asserted that it is impossible for a humanoid of that size to dwell in our planet without being observed more regularly. They point out that in order for them to live, a sizable population would be required. And if this were the case, they would be observed far more frequently. Others, however, disagree with this notion and have said that for 1,000 years, man has been encountering these giants with reports coming from Tibet, America, and even Australia. However, some people take it a step further and claim that they've managed to interact with these creatures. One of these is a 70-year-old woman who's detailed that she's been communicating with and raising a Bigfoot for almost a decade. Her incredible story details that she's raised the baby Bigfoot since it was young and that she's even managed to teach it a few words. The woman said she can back up her story with photographs and videos, but as of right now has decided not to release these. She first encountered the Bigfoot back in 1964 in a swamp in Louisiana, saying that the creature was weak and only weighed roughly 1.20 pounds. She then thought that if she didn't do anything, the creature might pass away. Wanting to avoid this, she took the baby Bigfoot home and started to raise it. When she got home, she fed the Bigfoot, saying that his favorite food was eggs, tomatoes, and goat's milk. After a couple of meals and getting the creature back on its feet, she said she released it back into the wild where it belonged. However, every time she did this, she said it refused to leave and would always find its way back to her. Over the next 8 years, she continued to raise and feed the animal, but said when it reached adulthood, she moved away. In 1974, she moved into a nearby town and said she had to leave the creatures behind. Something she said wasn't easy. She said the following about the whole experience. He was so little and so cute. I had to do something about it. He was so defenseless, lying next to the mud and water curled up crying like a baby. His parents either passed away or had abandoned him. He brought a friend home with him. At first, the other guy was shy hiding behind the bushes, but little by little, he began to trust me. So there we were sitting on my porch, 2 Bigfoots and I having dinner under the moon. Bigfoots are real, and they happen to be excellent creatures, though salt and better than most people. And by the way, they don't smell bad like some people say. I've given you a story? Tell it. That's all I want. Only another person besides you knows my secret now, and that's my friend Maggie. It's an interesting story. As with most of these, certain questions will be put forward. You have to provide evidence when it comes to these sorts of claims. As although they make for great stories, we need to see evidence to back up what's being said. However, even some people within the science community have come forward and said that we shouldn't dismiss these sightings. One question that's being put forward is, does forensic science back up Bigfoot claims? Jeff Meldon, professor of autonomy and anthropology evolutionary morphology, that is the study of how primates adapted to bipedalism. In his research, Meldrum studies footprints to determine how humans have evolved for upright walking. He studies samples from Africa as well as other places all around the world. Meldrum attributes his interest in Bigfoot to a track he discovered in southeastern Washington. It was here, he says, he found a fresh track. So fresh, he could see the skin ridges in detail. The print was at least 14 inches long. That first sighting was over 20 years ago. Since then, Meldrum has studied over 300 footprints as well as hundreds of photos of Bigfoot. When describing these cars, Meldrum said the feet are broader and flatter than humans. He also noted the lack of an arch and thumb-like big toe that would be similar to her name's. Instead, there was a big toe more like a human's. The toes were longer, presumably to help navigate the uneven terrain. Furthermore, based on the imprint, Meldrum believed the prints couldn't have been manufactured as some have said. The print is pressed into the ground in such a way that it shows flexibility. He noted that these prints are usually adapted to allow large primates to walk on 2 legs. To Meldrum, this evidence is proof that Bigfoot may exist, and it would be ridiculous to simply discount his evidence. Meldrum doesn't simply believe in Bigfoot. He is certain the creatures exist. Other researchers have pointed out that large humanoid creatures have been reported for at least the last 10,000 years, saying that ancient man has detailed their encounter with what they say are large humans. Going back, old tales in Australia said the Wa were the original inhabitants of the Australian continent, but were completely driven out of their native lands by the men that came there to settle. Occasionally, though, eyewitnesses from Australia report seeing what appears to be a Bigfoot creature. Following the Yowie rabbit hole results in more speculations from Australian government officials who conceal additional evidence that suggests Yowies are responsible for a large number of strange flying objects and alien sightings throughout Australia. Within the Yowie community, there are even subgroups that support the theory that the Yowie may be an alien race and that all of the Bigfoot varieties and creatures might be alien species. In Queensland, the Yowie creature is frequently seen. Numerous witnesses reported that this creature was unlike anything they had ever seen. Moving on to the next mystery. A small farming town in Fernald, Ohio happens to be the location of one of the strangest mysteries. The Feed Materials Production Center, also called the National Lead of Ohio, was the town's largest employment for many years. The National Lead of Ohio had not been known to the public that it had belonged to the Department of Energy. From the 1950s to the 1980s, it was one of the few facilities in the United States that had surreptitiously processed uranium for nuclear bombs. Harry Easterling was among the many workers who thought they were in a secure workplace. However, the secretive company faced a major scandal in 1984 when a factory accident caused massive amounts of radioactive smoke to be released into the atmosphere. The accident led to an investigation that revealed that the National Lead of Ohio had released more than 200 tons of radioactive dust into the air and water sources in the local area. Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of this story surrounded employee Dave Box, whose family believes he was taken out because he was about to reveal the truth about the company just a few months before the accident. Dave was a pipe fitter whose job it was to inspect and maintain the factory's equipment. His co-worker, Harry Easterling, believes Dave knew what the company was up to from conversations they had. On the day of his passing, a witness saw Dave walking towards Plant 4, although he had been assigned to Plant 8. That was the last time anyone saw Dave alive. That morning, a furnace operator assigned to Plant 6 informed his supervisor that there was a mysterious sticky residue covering the casings in his oven. The supervisor dismissed this and found nothing wrong. It was his coworker, Harry, who later reported Dave missing. Plant records showed that at approximately 5 in the morning, the temperature of the furnace in Plant 6 had dropped by about 28 degrees, suggesting that a foreign object had been dumped in. A worker also found what looked to be a bone on the furnace. After the sheriff's department had been called into the plant, one employee found a set of keys in the waste material that belonged to Dave's car. What was strange about this is his coworker had seen his keys in Dave's toolbox at around 7 in the morning, 2 hours after the foreign object had been dropped into the furnace, yet were then somehow found in the furnace. If this is true, it suggests that someone had taken Dave's life and then threw his keys into the furnace as a cover-up. His family and multiple former National Lead of Ohio employees believe he was lowered into the furnace and perished because he knew too much. If something other than the official story happened to Dave, it will probably never be revealed unless someone comes forward. Unfortunately, his family will have to live with this mystery until then. Moving on to the next mystery. For many years, Ohio's infamously hazardous Dead Man's Curve has been a site of mystery, tragedy, and terror. Despite being renovated and rebuilt in 1969 to increase safety, the road's reputation as a dangerous location endures, mostly because of the accident that happened a month after it reopened and the eerie mythology that followed. 5 adolescents were killed on October 19, 1969 when a car exceeding 100 miles per hour collided with their 1968 Chevy Impala. Rick, the crash's lone survivor, survived to share a terrifying tale that continues to linger in the area. He claims to have encountered a faceless figure on multiple occasions, a dark spirit said to haunt the site of the fatal accident. For years, Dead Man's Curve had been a source of fear and frustration for drivers in the area. This sharp bend in the road had been responsible for numerous crashes, many of them fatal, earning its grim nickname. The accident shocked the local community. And once again, Dead Man's Curve seemed to live up to its deadly reputation, even though the curve itself had been straightened. The only survivor was a man named Rick, who had been in the back seat of the Impala at the time of the crash. Although he suffered severe injuries, Rick managed to survive. However, his life was forever altered, not just by the physical and emotional trauma of the accident, but by the chilling experiences he would come to endure in the years that followed. Following the accident, reports of strange occurrences began to emerge from the site of the crash. Drivers passing through the area late at night claimed to see a mysterious figure standing near the side of the road. The figure, described as a man wearing dark, tattered clothing, appeared to be hitchhiking, but something about him was deeply unsettling. Those who saw him noted that he had no face. His features were either completely obscured or simply missing, as if a dark blank void had replaced what should have been a human visage. The faceless figure became a local legend, with many speculating that it was the spirit of one of the victims of the crash, doomed to wander the site of the tragedy for eternity. Some suggested that the figure might be the embodiment of the dangerous road itself, a spirit created by the long history of accidents associated with Dead Man's Curve. Regardless of the theory, one thing was clear. The intersection had not lost its aura of danger, and the faceless hitchhiker became a feared and infamous presence on that stretch of road. For Rick, the lone survivor of the 1969 crash, the faceless figure became more than just a local legend. It was a terrifying reality. Over the years, Rick has claimed to have seen the faceless hitchhiker 5 times, each encounter leaving him shaken and disturbed. His first sighting occurred not long after the accident, as he was driving through the area late one night. He described seeing the dark figure standing on the shoulder of the road, his arm outstretched as if asking for a ride. At first, Rick didn't notice anything unusual about the figure. But as he got closer, he realized the man had no face. Overwhelmed with fear, he sped away. But the image stayed with him for days. The second encounter occurred a few years later under similar circumstances. Rick was once again driving near the site of the crash when he saw the same faceless figure. By the time of his 5th encounter, Rick could no longer dismiss the figure as a trick of the mind or a product of his trauma. He was convinced that the faceless hitchhiker was somehow tied to the tragedy of the crash and perhaps even to the deaths of his friends. Rick speculated that the spirit might be one of the teenagers lost and searching for peace, or even a dark force that fed off the grief and fear surrounding Dead Man's Curve. Many drivers claim to have seen the enigmatic hitchhiker at Dead Man's Curve, perpetuating the mythology of the faceless figure. Some people think the ghost is real, a lingering presence connected to the tragic events of October 19, 1969, while others reject the sightings as optical illusions or figments of imagination brought on by the awful atmosphere of the place. Moving on to the next mystery. It's interesting to note that during the past few months, numerous witnesses from all around the world have claimed to have seen unknown objects gently descending to the ground while leaving a thick smoke trail. As a result, witnesses have called the police to report that something is amiss. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators who assume it's a plane and that they will want further help are taken aback when they discover nothing that would suggest that there was a problem. Recently, footage of a big object leaving a smoke trail over England revealed the presence of one of these UFOs. Those who witnessed it claimed that it appeared to be burning and described it as a black unknown object. One resident by the name of Miss Jeffries was able to capture clear photographs of the incident. She said the following: "This is what we captured on the same day and time. We live in Hilbert and Trowbridge. We too thought it was an aircraft, but what grabbed our attention was how it was falling vertically straight down at such a slow speed. It was just bizarre. I would love to find out what it was. It was the strangest thing we have ever seen." My friend's husband said the International Space Station crew were docking that day, so perhaps it could be debris from that. There was something so strange about it that we stopped to watch. I didn't want to worry my children so before taking photographs. I just said it could be something amazing falling from space. I think that's why my son didn't seem at all worried. My youngest did come downstairs at bedtime crying because he was frightened not knowing what it was. He calmed down eventually." End quote. Interestingly, other people living close to the area said that they also witnessed it and again described the object as falling slowly, but said that they couldn't make out what the object was. A man by the name of Mr. Craddock said that the mysterious object fell for over 20 minutes and that the vapor trail it was giving off was a dark black color. He said that his friends in London also saw the object. One police officer commented on a post that shared the photograph and said the following: "This incident was investigated by officers in the region. And although we could see an object falling to the ground, no one came forward to report a crash. Sometimes, these objects can be explained away as things like skydivers or even airplanes. But in this case, it did look like something was falling to the ground. My family that lives 25 miles away sent me photographs of the event, and I have to admit, I've never seen anything like it before. It was very bizarre." End quote. Shortly after the photographs were released online, a worker from the United Kingdom's aviation unit said that it was most likely a plane and that due to the angle of it, the object appeared to be falling from the sky. Many didn't buy this explanation though and said that for the past few years, these strange objects have been reported across countries. Oddly enough, after looking through gathered data, researchers have said that the United Kingdom is a hot spot when it comes to mysterious sightings and detail that hundreds of mysterious aircrafts have been spotted since the early 1940s, which has caused officials to conduct further research into the aircrafts to try and determine what they are and where they're coming from. The mysterious surveillance object. On August 5th, back in 2010, the Royal Air Force released a series of documents surrounding reported sightings of unidentified objects with additional documentation about a specific incident 50 years prior that Winston Churchill himself banned the reporting of out of fear that the story could create mass panic and lead to the degradation of society. The banned reports claimed that on the August 5th back in 1944, Royal Air Force reconnaissance aircraft was returning from an undisclosed surveillance mission from France or Germany. However, while traveling over the English coastline, the surveillance crew claimed to have been suddenly intercepted by what each crew member described as a peculiar metallic object that began to match their aircraft's course and speed alongside them before the object quickly accelerated into the distance and disappeared entirely. As the craft had hovered alongside their plane, several members of the crew rapidly began taking a series of photographs of the object to later verify their claims, as they possessed the equipment necessary to take higher quality images and gather sensitive data of enemy aircraft. However, as they began this documentation, they claimed that something appeared to be off about the unidentified object, as the unknown craft appeared to emit no sound or use any form of known propulsion to generate its lift. According to the released documents, any proof of the object gathered by the team has been completely destroyed or lost. Given this strange development, many believe that the event was covered up in its entirety, with researchers coming forward, including one man that wrote to the government back in 1999, claiming that his father had overheard the event while in a meeting alongside Winston Churchill and the then American President, Dwight D. Eisenhower. The United Kingdom has investigated mysterious aircrafts in the past. The most well-known investigation was known as Project Condign, which was conducted by the British Ministry of Defence's intelligence staff between 1992-000. The investigation's goals were to ascertain whether these unexplained aircraft sightings were a national security risk and whether any known technology or natural phenomena could be responsible. When the Project Condign study was made public in 2006, it came to the conclusion that most sightings might be explained by misidentifications of known objects or occurrences like balloons, airplanes, or weather phenomena. The paper did concede, though, that a tiny portion of sightings were difficult to explain and could need more research. Up to its closure in 2009, the British Ministry of Defence likewise ran a reporting and investigation system known as the Unidentified Object Desk. It's interesting to note that since then, a number of employees have come out to claim that the evidence has been manipulated with, and that these files do not contain all of the sightings that cannot be explained. The British Ministry of Defence has said that it will keep looking into any reliable claims of enigmatic aircraft that could have an impact on national security. Moving on to the next mystery. Henry Every, a famed pirate, vanished inexplicably. Henry Every was the most famous pirate of his time, achieving unmatched notoriety. He would have unquestionably been at the top of the most wanted list with the notorious designation of public enemy number 1 if such a categorization had been in place in the 16th century, less than a generation after he had apprehended the gang ISOI. Audiences joyfully watched his audacious adventures play out on the stage in the play The Successful Pirate. In the meantime, customers of busy alehouses would pound their tankards and jugs on tables in time with the melodies of several ballads that detailed Every's daring exploits, sometimes being popular for a week at a time. Fast forward to the year 17/24, and an almost accurate depiction of Every's piratical exploits served as the captivating opening chapter in London's newly emerged best-selling literary work, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates, authored by the enigmatic Captain Charles Johnson. The recognition of Every's achievements extended beyond just the general public. Both the government and the influential East India Company were deeply concerned about capturing Every. The seizure of the gang Soi, along with the subsequent reports of the brutalities that ensued, posed a significant threat to the already fragile relationship between the East India Company and Aurangzeb, the influential ruler of India. Without the support of Aurangzeb, the East India Company would have faced expulsion from the subcontinent, causing irreparable damage to the world's largest empire at its nascent stage. Evre's remarkable accomplishments earned him the title of Arch-Pirate, leading to the British government in Whitehall offering an unprecedented reward of £500 for his apprehension, a staggering sum for a pirate. The potential repercussions of Evre's actions were not only recognized by the public, but also attracted attention from the highest echelons of power, further emphasizing the significance of his capture. The extensive manhunt that ensued spanned across continents, making it undeniably the most monumental pursuit of 17th century. In Britain, every law enforcement officer was on high alert, diligently searching for Evre and his crew. The pursuit extended to the colonies of North America and the Caribbean, where the pirates were relentlessly pursued. News of their whereabouts was eagerly sought after by ships visiting Madagascar, and even authorities in India and the Red Sea region, such as the Mughals authorities and the East India Company, actively participated in the search. The sheer scale and scope of this manhunt transcended geographical boundaries, showcasing the concerted efforts of law enforcement agencies across the globe. From the shores of Britain to the far reaches of the colonies, no stone was left unturned in the pursuit of these notorious pirates. Despite the considerable amount of effort invested, along with the enticing reward offered, the outcome was rather underwhelming. Only a small number of Evre's cohorts were apprehended, and even then the majority of them were eventually released. Evre, the mastermind behind the operation, managed to vanish without a trace, taking with him his share of the stolen riches and evading capture indefinitely. During the golden age of piracy from approximately 16/90 to 17/30, numerous notorious pirates met their fates in various ways. There were also those who suffered the grim destiny of being marooned on desolate islands or falling victim to mutinous crews. However, in the midst of this dangerous era, one pirate stands out for his remarkable achievement, Henry Evre. Unlike his contemporaries, Henry Evre not only survived, but he thrived. Few pirate commanders were able to accept a pardon or escape to tropical paradises, but none were as successful as Henry Evre. His whereabouts and the fate of his enormous fortunes are still unknown, and historians and scholars are still perplexed by Henry Evre's mysterious end. But his acts had repercussions that lasted for decades, reverberating across history and permanently altering the course of human history. His absence created a kind of revolution, kindling a fire in a later generation of pirates who aimed to imitate his boldness and daring actions. Moving on to the next mystery. Nicole Louise Moran, born on April 1, 1977, was raised in Toronto. Her parents, Arthur and Jeanette Moran, married around 12 years before her birth. After her parents separated when she was very young, Nicole moved in with her mother to the 20th floor of the West Mall apartments in the Etobicoke area of Toronto. On the morning of July 30, 1985, Nicole went down to the building's lobby to retrieve her mail. Nicole quickly returned to her mother's apartment after picking up the mail. She had plans to meet a friend from school for a swim at the pool behind the complex at 11 a.m., just 30 minutes away. Meanwhile, her mother, Jeanette, was running a daycare out of the apartment, looking after several children. Nicole told her friend over the intercom that she would meet her in the lobby soon, and left the apartment at 11 o'clock. However, just 15 minutes later, Nicole was nowhere to be found. Once more, her pal buzzed her flat to inquire as to her whereabouts. But Jeanette didn't think much of it, speculating that her daughter might have gone off to play by herself in the pool or meet another friend. That afternoon, the little girl was not reported missing until 3 or 4 p.m. The 8-year-old went missing, and the Toronto police responded right away. They canvassed neighbors and started searching the building, which had over 400 units, right away. Roadblocks were set up around the complex, and cars with PA systems were used to alert nearby residents and neighbors about Nicole's disappearance, sharing her description. Investigators went door to door in the building, discovering that Nicole had made it to the lobby but had vanished before meeting her friend. No further evidence was found to indicate where she went or what happened after she reached the ground floor. Witnesses did not see her exit the elevator. The following day, additional Toronto police officers were deployed to assist in the search for the missing girl. Law enforcement also used ATVs, marine units, aircraft, deployed dogs, and officers mounted on horses. 900 people from the neighborhood joined the search as they concentrated on looking into Highway 27, which was close to the apartment complex. There was no sign of the small girl. About 45 minutes before Nicole disappeared, a neighbor reported to the police that they had seen a blonde woman on the 20th floor carrying a notebook but not knowing who she was. She was never identified and never came forward, despite the fact that police enforcement wanted to talk to her. Whether anyone is connected to Nicole's disappearance remains a mystery. Toronto's newly established Crime Stoppers took on the case, offering a $1,000 reward for information that could lead to Nicole's return and the capture of her abductor. They also created a film that depicted the 8-year-old's last known movements. Additionally, the Toronto Star newspaper printed 6,000 copies of a poster featuring Nicole's image and the contact number for Metro Toronto Police. Another 3,000 copies of a watercolor sketch of Nicole, created by police, were distributed to other police stations, post offices, and local stores. At the time, the search for Nicole became the largest missing person investigation in Toronto Police Service history. Over 25,000 man-hours were spent on the hunt over the 9 months that 20 investigators worked on the case. 4 months following the disappearance, in November 1985, 6,000 people had been questioned. 100 of them were registered sex offenders. Nicole's safe return was offered $100,000 by law enforcement. A strange clue discovered during the investigation was a pencil note Nicole had written that said, "I'm going to disappear." Although it was confirmed that the note had been written months before Nicole's disappearance, little information about its contents is available, and the message she intended to convey remains unclear. When the note was discovered, Nicole's friends and family were excluded from the investigation. Understandably, Jeanette and Arthur Moran struggled to cope with the loss of their daughter. Despite going against the police's advice, Arthur, known by his stage name, Art, managed to raise enough money to hire a private detective. He also quit his job, set up a satellite office outside his home, and devoted all his time to searching for Nicole. Art and Jeanette briefly moved back in together, but they ended their relationship 2 years later in 1987. 7. In a desperate attempt to obtain answers, Jeanette reached out to a psychic, but neither she nor Art were able to learn the child's fate. Images of Nicole were reportedly found among pictures that had been sent to an internet pedophile network in 2004, according to researchers for a Belgian anti-pedophile organization. To find the match, they used biometric data and her photos from a Canadian police website. The Belgian group claimed a striking resemblance between a child in their network and Nicole, concluding that she was likely molested by a sex offender who sold the photos to the network, rather than being trafficked to Holland. Although the organization asserted that Toronto police had been notified of this information, it appears that little progress was made, and the lead is rarely mentioned in Canadian media. Nicole's case remains unsolved, with no concrete evidence discovered. Although it is considered a cold case, detectives and missing children's organizations continue to keep it in the public eye, hoping to generate new leads that could eventually bring resolution. Several recreations of Nicole's final movements have been produced over the years in an effort to uncover the truth. Nicole was featured in an age-progressed picture that was published in 2001, showcasing her appearance in her early 20s. 13 years later, when Crime Stoppers received a call asking the police to follow up on a tip they had received shortly after the disappearance in 1985, they investigated a home on Horseshoe Valley Road in Springwater Township. Although it's unclear what the cops were searching for, it doesn't appear that this lead produced any results. On the 34th anniversary of Nicole's disappearance in 2019, further age-enhanced images of the woman that appeared to depict her in her early 40s were made public. It's more a question of when than whether the police think the case will be solved. In June 2022, the Toronto Sun reported that detectives had been excavating an undisclosed location north of Toronto, following up on information they had gathered in 2014, with suspicions that Nicole Moran may have been buried there. While no remains were found, authorities revealed they had uncovered new clues during the investigation. In addition, police were investigating the possibility that Nicole's disappearance could be linked to Calvin Hoover, a notorious child murderer. Hoover had kidnapped 9-year-old Christine Jessup from her Queensville home on October 3, 1984. She was sexually assaulted and killed, and her body was later dumped in a forest in Durham. Nicole vanished, and Christine was killed within a year of each other, and their distance from one another was about 70 kilometers. Hoover was living in Scarborough at the time, which was halfway between the houses of the two girls, and he frequently traveled to and from Toronto for work. The police announced that they intended to talk with Hoover's wife, whom he was married to in the mid-1980s, when it became known that they were investigating Hoover's potential involvement in Nicole's case. It's unclear whether Hoover's involvement has been ruled out, or whether this is still being looked into. In 2007, Nicole's mother, Jeanette, passed suddenly from a heart attack. Art, Nicole's father, continues to search for the truth regarding her disappearance. Nicole Moran, an 8-year-old white girl with brown hair and eyes, vanished from the West Mall apartment complex in Toronto on July 30, 1985. At the time, she weighed 51 pounds and stood 4 feet tall. When last seen, Nicole was wearing a peach-colored swimsuit, a green hairband, and red canvas shoes. Despite the passage of time, her father remains dedicated to uncovering what happened to his daughter. Nicole was also carrying a plastic bag containing a purple beach towel, a hairbrush, suntan lotion, green and white shorts, a white t-shirt, and a peach-colored blanket. Despite extensive efforts, Nicole's case remains unresolved. The search for answers continues as her father, Art, perseveres in his quest for the truth behind her disappearance. Moving on to the next mystery. Snowtown, directed by Justin Kurzel, premiered at the Adelaide Film Festival in 2011, receiving critical acclaim. Kurzel's unflinching approach to portraying the chilling and brutal reality of the Snowtown murders set the tone for the film. Based on the true events of these infamous killings, the film is a harrowing depiction of a series of murders that took place between August 1992 and May 1999 in Adelaide, South Australia. Known as the Bodies in Barrels murders, these crimes shocked the nation and are considered one of the most disturbing cases in Australian criminal history. The discovery of the first body in Lower Light Township in 1994 initially did not connect to a series of murders, and it was dismissed as an isolated case. A similar death in 1997, believed to be a suicide, added to the mystery. It wasn't until November 20, 1998, when a man contacted the police to report his sister, Elizabeth Hayden, missing, that the connection between the murders started to unfold. It was strange that Elizabeth had not been seen or heard from since the day before. However, the investigation took a surprising turn when it was revealed that Elizabeth had a husband, Mark, who had never reported her missing. This raised suspicions and led authorities to delve deeper into the case, eventually uncovering the true scale of the murders. When they met with Hayden, he provided them with divergent explanations for not filing a missing persons report and contradictory stories of his wife's movements. Investigating Elizabeth Hayden's disappearance, law enforcement discovered an ancient state bank facility in the little village of Snowtown, some 87 miles north of Adelaide, that her husband was renting. 8 people's remains, including Elizabeth Hayden's, were discovered by South Australian police in 6 plastic barrels within a shuttered vault on May 20, 1999. From this point on, the horrifying situation was revealed right in front of them. The head of the squad of serial killers was identified as John Justin Bunting, born on September 4, 1960. Bunting was sexually and physically assaulted as a child by the elder brother of a friend. As he got older, he started to grow a deep disdain for humans in general. Plus he hated gay men, drug users, and everyone else he thought was weak or a burden on society in particular. Bunting, who was described as having a god complex, had a spider wall, which was a web of colored wool on which he affixed notes, bearing the names of people he intended to kill next. Bunting started working at an abattoir when he was 22 years old. It has been stated that he boasted about killing animals and said it was his favorite thing to do. According to other accounts, he was fascinated by injuring animals even before he decided to pursue this line of work. Bunting relocated to a home in the southern region of the nation in 1991 and settled in Salisbury North. He started seeing Christine Harvey and her adolescent son, James, with whom he moved in with. Eventually, James started taking part in Bunting's misdeeds. Bunting also became friendly with two of his neighbors, Mark Hayden and Robert Wagner. Bunting is said to have persuaded Robert Joe Wagner, who was born on November 28, 1971 in Parramatta, New South Wales, to take part in the killings. Wagner was dating someone much older than him when they first got together. Regarding the identity of his partner, there is some confusion. The majority claimed that Wagner was in a relationship with gay man and crossdresser Barry Lane. Others have pointed out that Lane was transsexual and went by the name Vanessa. Which version is correct is uncertain. Most remarkably, Wagner started dating Lane at the age of 14, when Lane was in their late 20s and had reached adulthood. Born on December 4, 1958, Mark Hayden was a Bunting's colleague. He started renting the shuttered State Bank in Snowtown in January 1999, giving the impression to the authorities that the bodies had been transported when Elizabeth's disappearance was being investigated. The rental was in Hayden's name. Though it's a relief that the group's horrible atrocities have come to an end, this may not have been their most cunning move. All four men were suspected to have taken part in the murders at some stage, with Bunting being the leader of the group's actions. The four were taken into custody on May 21, 1999, when the remains in the barrels were found. 2 further corpses were discovered and turned in Bunting's backyard. Furthermore, a total of 12 persons were believed to have been murdered by them. James' stepbrother and half-brother, Lane and Hayden's wife, and Wagner's boyfriend are among their victims. The trial that lasted the longest in South Australia's history, nearly 12 months, involved both Bunting and Wagner. Bunting was found guilty in December of 2003 of 11 murders. Wagner had admitted to 3 crimes before being found guilty of 10. James, who is young, entered a guilty plea to 4. Hayden was found guilty on 5 counts of aiding in the murders in 2004, and he acknowledged his involvement in 2 of them. Due to the jury's inability to reach a decision, the last accusation against Bunting and Wagner was dismissed. The 2 were charged with killing Suzanne Allen, Bunting's former lover. Bunting, the ringleader, received 11 consecutive life sentences without the chance of release. Wagner received 10 consecutive life sentences without the chance of release. He said that pedophiles were abusing youngsters, citing a quotation from the document. There was nothing the government could do about it. I made the decision to act. That's what I did. I'm grateful. Even though the great majority of the group's victims weren't pedophiles, he nevertheless made this assertion. Many belonged to the LGBTQ+ community or had intellectual disabilities. James received 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of release for 26 years. He is presently incarcerated in an undisclosed South Australian facility and is kept in isolation. He turned key witness for the Crown prosecution after confessing to 4 of the murders in 2001. Regarding Mark Hayden, he received a sentence of 25 years in prison with an 18-year non-parole period. It has never been determined what the real reason behind the killings was. Despite this, The Age, an Australian publication, states in one of its articles about the crimes that the main driver was an ego-fueled mixture of power and pleasure. Additionally, it has been established that the crimes got worse over time. A 22-year-old gay man named Clinton Trezos was the group's first victim. On August 31, 1992, Bunting is said to have struck Trezos over the head with a blunt object. After this, though, things did get worse, with many of the victims suffering until they passed away. Knives, saws, at least 1 shotgun, rope, tape, gloves, pliers, clamps, a cloth, and an electric shock device were discovered to be with the guys when they were taken into custody. You can find online information on the suffering these victims endured. But if you decide to look deeper, be advised that it contains gruesome material. The men frequently made their victims repeat their bank account information so they could access their accounts after death, albeit this was not believed to be the primary motivation behind the group's acts prior to killing their victims. In other instances, the victims' money was kept by the gang because they were never reported missing. They took almost $100,000 from their victims during the course of their activities. In May 1999, James, at barely 20 years old, assisted in the death of David Johnson, a 24-year-old. He was the last victim of the group. In addition to the horrific torture, the victim was forced to divulge all of his financial information so that his accounts could be accessed and his money stolen after his death. The notoriety of the killings ironically boosted Snowtown's economy, as more people visited to see the town where these atrocities occurred. However, the economic benefit was short-lived, and Snowtown was left with a long-lasting reputation tied to the murders. Local officials considered renaming the town to Rosetown in an effort to distance themselves from the grisly events, but as of 2021, the town's name remains unchanged. Moving on to the next mystery. Former NASA engineer reveals huge objects have been photographed close to Saturn. Dr. Norman Berggren, a former NASA engineer and esteemed scientist, made waves in both scientific and UFO communities with his provocative claims regarding unidentified flying objects in our solar system. Berggren, who had a distinguished career working on projects like the Voyager missions, became known for his assertion that UFOs have taken a particular interest in Saturn's rings. According to Berggren, these mysterious objects have been captured on numerous occasions lurking close to the planet, engaging in activities that suggest they are far more than mere space debris. His claims, detailed in his 1986 book, The Ringmakers of Saturn, continue to fuel debates about the possibility of extraterrestrial life and the hidden truths within our solar system. In The Ringmakers of Saturn, Berggren detailed his analysis of photographs taken by the Voyager spacecraft. He claimed to have identified large cylindrical objects, sometimes miles in length, within Saturn's rings. These objects, according to Berggren, exhibited behaviors that suggested they were not natural satellites or space rocks, but rather something far more complex and possibly artificial. Dr. Berggren's most startling claim is that these cylindrical objects, which he dubbed ringmakers, are responsible for the formation and maintenance of Saturn's rings. He suggested that these objects were not only massive in scale but also demonstrated intelligent control over their movements and activities. The objects appear to be interacting with the rings, possibly harvesting material, or even creating the rings themselves. According to Berggren, these UFOs had been observed near Saturn for years, often hiding within the dense rings where they could go unnoticed by casual observers. He posited that the UFOs were drawing energy from the rings or the planet itself, a theory that intrigued many within the UFO community. The notion that extraterrestrial beings or technologies might be using the rings for purposes beyond human understanding was both thrilling and unsettling. Berggren's claims were based on his meticulous analysis of the Voyager images, where he identified anomalies that he believed could not be explained by natural processes alone. The cylindrical objects, he argued, were too large and moved too purposefully to be random debris. Instead, they seemed to be massive constructs of unknown origin, possibly extraterrestrial spacecraft or devices. Berggren's work found a sympathetic audience among UFO enthusiasts and those who believe in the presence of extraterrestrial life. Despite the scientific community's resistance to adopting his beliefs, many were fascinated by the notion that intelligent alien civilizations might be engaging with Saturn's rings, and his experience as a NASA engineer lends weight to his assertions. E.B. Stepek, often called E.B. Jane by her family and friends, was a self-reliant and hardworking individual, as well as a loyal friend. Her aspirations to start fresh and build a successful life were tragically cut short in October 2005, when her life was claimed by an unsolved and puzzling murder. In her hometown of Little Rock, Arkansas, those who knew her were left grappling with unanswered questions amidst a flood of conflicting information. This investigation into E.B. Stepek's death and the chilling mystery surrounding Charlemont Park seeks to provide deeper insights through visible evidence and situational analysis. In the suburbs of Little Rock, Arkansas, E.B. was born on March 31, 1997, to Lori Jernigan and Peter Stepek. Growing up in a small town fostered close bonds within her family, especially with her mother, who once said, "I knew from her very first breath that we would be close and that she would be a very special young lady." Over time, Eby's family grew, welcoming Harris, the youngest sibling, to join her and their older brother, Trevor. The siblings were tightly knit, often spending time together at church or with their loving grandparents. The Stepek children were raised in a creative environment, surrounded by deeply artistic influences within both their immediate and extended families. Above all, Eby enjoyed photography, and as she grew older, she developed a special interest in cutting-edge fashion. She rapidly turned cosmetology into a pastime, picking up the fundamentals of cosmetics application and hair styling. By the time Eby reached high school, she had begun to think about her future and had decided she wanted to be a real estate agent in addition to a cosmetologist. In addition to her professional goals, Eby developed empathy for her peers. She made it her mission to ensure her friends' and family's safety, going above and beyond to shield those she cared about from harm as well as from outside influences. Eby was a source of support for those feeling stuck, spreading positivity throughout her community. Alongside her natural compassion and empathy, she demonstrated a strong sense of independence. As she grew older, Eby charted her own path, making decisions based on her own understanding and refusing to let outside opinions sway her. Her fierce individuality became especially evident the summer before her senior year of high school. Seeking freedom from the limitations of private education, she transferred to Little Rock Central High School. Eby worked at a Foot Locker shoe store in McCain Mall the summer before she entered public school. At this point, Eby's mother, who had since remarried after divorcing, began to observe changes in her daughter's behavior. She asserted that Eby was far more combative, going against the norm of the Stepek household's established set of regulations, and staying out past curfew to attend neighborhood parties. Eby's parents were also curious as to whether the changes in her demeanor were related to her recent relationship. She had moved in with a new partner. Lori disapproved of Eby's boyfriend, believing he was having a harmful influence on her daughter. Ultimately, Eby's strong-willed independence, combined with growing family tensions, led her to move out of her parents' house. She began living with her grandparents, her older brother Trevor, and some close school friends. One of those friends, Danielle, observed that Eby seemed troubled by an unspecified issue. To clear her mind, Eby often took long drives at night, blasting music along the way. Danielle mentioned that these drives usually seemed to help, though she never fully understood what was going on beneath the surface. By October, as her senior year began, Eby developed a habit of skipping class, leading to frequent absenteeism. On October 24, 2015, Eby went back to her mother and stepfather's house to tell them that she had been gang raped by 4 individuals at a party the previous evening. This marked the top of all the weird behavior. She insisted on seeing justice done, convinced that the incident had been captured on camera by a cell phone. Shortly after, Eby rushed away, perhaps seeking her own retribution on the 4 accused. She started communicating with her friends and family in an inconsistent and concerning way that made little sense. On the afternoon of October 25th, Eby made one final call to her brother, confessing that she had made a mistake, and then disappeared without a trace. After 2.5 years of uncertainty, her remains were discovered in Charlemont Park in May 2018, transforming her missing persons case into a cold case homicide. By the summer of 2015, Eby's life had undergone significant changes. She had moved out of her parents' home, taken a job at a nearby Foot Locker, entered a relationship her family didn't approve of, transferred to a public school for her senior year, and shown increasing frustration with her social and personal life. As summer turned to fall, Eby's unexplained absences from school and growing distance from loved ones continued to cause concern among her friends and family. On Wednesday, October 21st, the pattern of truancy peaks. Danielle, Eby's friend who has been staying with her at the time, texts Eby to let her know she will be running late for her doctor's appointment, and that it's acceptable if Eby needs to leave his school alone. Danielle had a charter school called the Lisa Academy, and Eby was meant to drive her there. However, Eby texted Danielle back, saying, "No. It's not a big deal at all." Danielle later admitted that she hadn't understood what turmoil Eby might have been referencing when she mentioned not wanting to go out that day. Despite this, the friends were in good spirits when they met up later that evening. However, 2 days later, on the night of Friday, October 23rd, Evie attended a party alone. Danielle later explained that she didn't go because she didn't know anyone else at the gathering, suggesting that Evie was the only one familiar with the group. Evie is gang raped by 4 guys during the celebrations, and one of their cell phones is purportedly captured on camera. On Saturday, October 24th, early the following morning, Abby goes back to her mother's house and tells Michael, her stepfather, and Lori about the sexual assault. Abby wants the grown-ups to go with her when she goes to the police station to report the crime. Lori and Michael accept and inquire about meeting her at the police station at a later time. Since the morning turns into the afternoon, Debbie tells Danielle that she must stay at her older brother Trevor's residence to reassure him since he has been concerned about her prolonged absence. Before leaving Trevor's house, Evie visited her grandparents, relaxing in bed to watch TV. Later, they had dinner together and went out for frozen yogurt. Around 8 p.m., Evie said goodbye to her grandparents, telling them she planned to meet her stepfather, Michael, and would be staying with him overnight. Despite what Evie had mentioned to Danielle earlier that day, her grandparents kept their door open for her, just in case. Tonight is the evening shift, and Lori and Michael have not received a response from their daughter. They attempted to contact her cell phone but got no answer. When Evie searches independently for the purported mobile phone footage, Michael theorizes. According to cell phone records, Evie texted all 4 of the males from Friday's party several times throughout this period, accusing them of rape. Evie doesn't get in touch with her until 2 p.m. the next day. On Sunday, October 25th, Evie called her brother Trevor, and he noticed that she sounded confused. She initially claimed to be outside his house, but when Trevor stepped outside, she was nowhere to be seen. After the call dropped, Trevor called her back and insisted on knowing her location. Evie responded that she was in her car but refused to disclose where she was parked or who she was with. Then the phone clicks off, and Evie says, "I fed up." This would be the final known communication with Evie that anyone would have. When Sunday night arrives and the sun has fallen, Evie's parents have filed a missing persons report. Nevertheless, in accordance with departmental protocol, the police do not launch an official investigation until 12 hours have passed after her last point of contact. In the meantime, terrified, Danielle drives around the town looking for clues at all the places she and Evie used to hang out. 3 days later, on Wednesday, October 28th, a security officer monitoring a nearby parking lot near a wooded section of Charlemagne Park, a local recreation area in Little Rock, spotted Evie's 2003 Volkswagen Passat. On October 30th, law enforcement arrived to seize the vehicle after it had been parked in the same spot for 2 days. The investigation began when they confirmed the car's ownership and found an empty gas tank, a dead battery, the key in the ignition, and Evie's phone, wallet, and contact lenses in the front seats. A few days later, while conducting their own search, Evie's close friend Kaylee and her mother, Margie Foley, noticed a strong odor of decay coming from a sewage drain near Charlemagne Park. When detectives returned to the area, following multiple complaints to the Little Rock Police Department, they dismissed the Foley's claims, stating that their cadaver dogs would have detected any signs of human decomposition, as they had already conducted a thorough search of the area. The Foleys are forced away because they believe the stench to be that of an animal. Evie's family releases a plea in November of that year asking for help in finding her and offering a $3,000 incentive for any necessary expenses. As volunteer activity picks up steam, search and rescue missions scour the forest close to Markham Street and Bowman Road in April 2016. Nothing noteworthy was discovered. 5 months later, in November 2016, authorities scoured Charlemont Park for 3 days straight again, but they were unsuccessful. After authorities suggested in May 2017 that the case was likely a homicide, the Stepek family raised the reward for information to $50,000 a month later. In October of that year, the family hired a second private investigator, Jay Ward, who had worked on the high-profile Natalie Holloway case in Aruba. Their efforts garnered a global following, and a few weeks later, in December 2017, Phil conducted interviews with Lori and Trevor. A significant breakthrough occurred in May 2018 when bone remains were discovered in a drainage pipe following another search at Charlemagne Park. Police send the bones for testing right away, and it is soon determined that they are, in fact, E.B. Stepek's remains. 3 years after E.B. vanished, in October 2018, law enforcement said that the medical examiner had determined the preliminary cause of death for E.B. However, no further information or the COD result was disclosed since the case remained under investigation as a homicide. No more updates would be provided as of right now. Police continue to encourage anyone with knowledge to come forward, though. In the broader context of E.B. Stepek's case, it's difficult to pinpoint any significant clues or well-established leads. However, when scrutinized more closely, one area of the evidence could provide crucial insights into who E.B. was in contact with before her disappearance and how the initial investigation was muddled by inconsistencies. The phone logs may hold the answers. A series of texts E.B. sent from her phone to several of the men involved in a sexual assault at the party on Friday, October 23, was the first clear indication that something was wrong before she vanished. Monty Vickers, the Stepek family's first private investigator, managed to collect these texts. According to the victims, E.B. was direct in her messages, threatening to contact the police. These texts may indicate a much deeper significance regardless of whether she was scaring the men into participating or just threatening to erase the purported film. They may easily fall on Sunday, the 25th, the day of E.B.'s last phone conversation with her brother. If E.B. had texted the 4 men and they had responded in a menacing way, she might have been afraid of reprisals or worse. That's why she says she made a mistake just before the phone cuts off. The exact locations of the interactions can't be determined because, unfortunately, the police never checked the cell towers that would have pinged during these communications, nor did they investigate the messages or the final phone call. The ping data may never be collected and analyzed, but E.B.'s footprints and cell phone records could still provide crucial information. Another mysterious and troubling detail in the phone records are the 2 phone calls made from E.B.'s phone to the Little Rock Police Department late on the night of Saturday, October 24th. Each call, lasting about a minute, was recorded as an outgoing connection to the LRPD. What's most perplexing is that the police department has no record of either call, despite the Stepek family's belief that these were E.B.'s initial and follow-up attempts to report the assault from the night before. Officers informed the mother they did not have a record of those calls, according to reporter Ginny Monk. Not even a handwritten note about a young woman being raped. The seconds spent on the phone are not tracked in the call log. Not only is this a regrettable documentation gap, but it also casts doubt on the LRPD. How come calls that come in repeatedly from the same individuals saying they have been sexually attacked go unanswered? If the calls weren't about the assault, E.B. may have been reaching out to express concerns about her uncertain and troubling circumstances. Why, then, didn't the dispatcher notify the authorities? It's possible they dismissed it as a false alarm. However, E.B.'s cell phone records remain largely unexplained, especially in light of the lack of evidence that the LRPD properly recorded the calls. It remains unclear why she made the calls or what was said, but at the very least, this raises serious questions about the handling of the investigation and erodes public trust in the officers who initially mishandled E.B.'s case. There were a lot of theories early in the inquiry when E.B. was still listed as missing rather than a victim of homicide, about where she could have gone and whether or not she had departed on her own initiative. Those theories are now moot in light of the few information we presently possess on her death and likely murder. However, there are other places on the internet that question if E.B.'s demise was due to suicide. According to these views, E.B.'s disoriented behavior when speaking with her brother Trevor on the phone may have been caused by a mental breakdown the day before she vanished. Trapped and exhausted, she parked near Charlemagne Park and crawled into the sewage drain pipe to either hide from her pursuers or unwind. It's difficult to argue that her environment would have caused her death, as such possibilities seem highly unlikely. Suicide, for instance, would not have been feasible in such a confined space. There was no blood trail or weapons nearby, and the temperature wasn't low enough to cause hypothermia. Furthermore, it's hard to believe dehydration or starvation played a role, as Eby would not have willingly stayed in such conditions long enough to die from them. If she had become trapped in any way, shouting or calling out would likely have alerted someone, perhaps a security guard or search and rescue personnel, to her situation. Suicide is ruled out as a possible cause of Eby's death in the absence of any proof or logical explanation. It is now more important to determine who murdered Eby than whether she was murdered, as authorities have declared the death to be a homicide. A well-known theory put forth by case supporters is that a serial killer may be involved. After closely examining recent homicide and criminal history records in Arkansas, no possible serialist patterns could be found that would provide an explanation for Eby's death. It cannot, however, be totally ruled out in light of potential future discoveries or breakthroughs, given the dearth of suspects and unpredictable nature of serial murderer discovery. There was also speculation among some residents about the potential involvement of gang activity in the case. Unfortunately, Little Rock has gained a reputation in recent years for the criminal actions of local gangs and their members, who have been known to commit assault, murder, and engage in drug and prostitution trafficking. If Eby had become involved with the wrong people in the days or months leading up to her disappearance, especially during a period when she was experiencing significant changes in behavior and attitude, it could have led to her encountering a dangerous gang. She may have inadvertently ventured into a risky part of the city while experimenting with drugs or alcohol. It might also provide additional context for her phone conversation with Trevor when she claimed, "I messed up." Perhaps it was not only a reference to that particular incident, but rather a series of moments that led Eby to spiral into an unfixable position. The most popular, implausible idea, on the other hand, describes a potential murderous plot by one, many, or all of the 4 men who were charged with her sexual assault on Friday, October 23rd. The 4 guys had a clear motivation for manslaughter and were the last persons Eby had spoken to outside of her family, regardless of whether they belonged to a gang or other associated group. If Eby had known there was video proof and the men were guilty of rape, they would have wanted her to remain silent. Based on family memories and her 2013 Twitter account, it seems that Eby was outspoken and unafraid to express her opinions, including dissatisfaction with certain situations. It's possible that those involved in the crime may have sought to silence her after she sent multiple texts indicating her awareness of the incident and her intention to report it to the police. Notably, the lead detectives at the LRPD ruled out the 4 men as suspects in 2017, prior to the discovery of Eby's remains, and chose not to identify them. Their identities remained unknown until the bones were found in Charlemagne Park a year later. However, a Reddit rumor, citing sources close to the case, suggests that one of the 4 men may be the son of a police officer. The police said the accused would once again be considered as points of interest within their identities. We cannot definitively rule out the idea that something is real, but we also cannot rule it out. It adds considerably more mystery to the final theory, assuming it is accurate at all. The family of Eby and the people of Arkansas have scrutinized and criticized the entire investigation into her original disappearance and subsequent murder. The handling of Charlemagne Park and the search techniques used by the original detectives are the main points of contention among the public. As previously reported, a few days after Eby disappeared, her friends Kaylee and Margie Foley called the police after noticing what they described as signs of carcass decomposition near the park's sewer system. However, when the police arrived, they dismissed it as merely the decay of an animal and insisted there was no need to revisit the area, claiming they had already searched it. This response seems careless and raises concerns. Regardless of how many times the area had been searched, if signs of decay were detected near where the missing teenager's car was found, it should have prompted further investigation. While it could have been an animal, the Foleys may have been onto something, as Eby's remains were eventually discovered in the same location, near the pipes, 2.5 years later. Apart from the unpleasant odor, the security officers reported that Eby's car was left unattended in the parking lot, but the cops did not come. The authorities needed 3 days to travel to the park and examine the Volkswagen. 3 days is more than enough time for the offender to make amends and retrieve whatever proof they may have left behind. Furthermore, putting in the effort to handle a new Amber Alert scenario displays a lack of care and attention. When one considers the paucity of paperwork and the absence of response to EB's October 24 phone call to the LRPD, one gets similar feelings. Since then, they've informed reporters that they erased their bank of 911 call records from October 2015, which again seems like more than a coincidence. Many law enforcement agencies maintain records of 911 calls for an extended period, if not the full audio recordings. Additional complaints about the initial investigators highlight the fact that key individuals in the case were not interviewed. For instance, the last people to see EB, her grandparents, were not questioned for over a year and a half after her disappearance. Furthermore, the security officer who discovered EB's car wasn't officially interviewed until months later, when Monty Vickers, the first private investigator, conducted an interview with him. In fact, the security guard told Vickers that he had video from his car that showed EB seeing an unknown male in the same parking lot where her car was parked several times. It's sad that these videotapes were old and removed before EB disappeared, but it's still incomprehensible why the initial investigators on the case declined to speak with the security officer who had such fascinating and important information. Unfortunately, not much else is known about the guard or the enigmatic individual from the parking lot. All we can hope is that the detectives working on EB's case now take all of these factors into account and have gone back to look at the warning signs that concerned bystanders have pointed out. The issue is particularly perplexing because there are very little published details or records available for public review. On one hand, it makes perfect sense. To protect the victim and their family, and to prevent the offender from gaining an advantage, law enforcement typically withholds information on active homicide cases. As a result, the investigation remains ongoing. However, this secrecy also fuels local conspiracy theories and speculation. The volatility of the internet exacerbates this, spreading rumors, such as the police chief's son being involved. Unfortunately, the inability to verify or disprove these stories only does more harm than good, feeding the uncertainty and mistrust surrounding the case. From here, we assume that when EB left her grandparents' house on Saturday, October 24th, she did so with brave intentions. She was not willing to tolerate the aggressive behavior of her four attackers, and she stood up for herself when she called the Little Rock Police Department and got no help. According to EB's mother, Lori, EB never kept secrets if doing so would jeopardize someone else's safety. And in this instance, she wasn't willing to stand by and let that exact thing to happen to herself. She threatened legal action against a few of the attackers and messages, revealing that she was aware of the video evidence. The four attackers may have either directly responded to the incident, or enlisted others to carry out what was about to unfold, likely stirring feelings of fear and anger in the men EB had texted. They might have later pretended to feel remorse, claiming they deleted the messages and offering a face-to-face apology. EB, perhaps trusting in the goodness of others, might have naively agreed to meet them in the hope of ending the pain. This could have been where the situation took a tragic turn. Charlemagne Park, where EB's car was found abandoned with the engine off, likely confused investigators and gave the perpetrators the time they needed to dispose of her body. This is most likely where the meeting took place instead of Charlemagne Park. Following the police's initial search of the park, the body was relocated to the drainage pipe, which is why the Foley family smelled decaying food and also explains why the cadaver dogs didn't find any scent during the initial search. It is impossible to say for sure how often the body was moved after that, if at all, but it's possible that it wasn't there on the night of Sunday, October 25th, when the maiden mystery started. It is not possible to verify the actual deeds of the four men charged with rape, the original detectives, or any other co-conspirators until the case is fully resolved and arrests are publicized. In the meantime, all we can do is honor EB and her memory with dignity and grace. She loved listening to the waves at the beach, finding peace in the calm, the seashells, the sand, and the sunshine. In her obituary, her mother shared a story from when EB was 10 years old, during a vacation where they experienced a tropical depression that was expected to last for 7 days. EB's mother said, "We're praying the storm away." When she asked to go outside and play, the rest of us watched the sun come out, and the rest of the week was filled with sunlight. But she stepped straight out into the storm and prayed it away. One of our favorite spots was the beach. She is still with me, and I will always feel that way. Wherever the next life may lead, we can hope that Evie is now enjoying the warmth of another kind of beach. In the meantime, we must continue working tirelessly to bring an end to her senseless death and restore peace to the Stepik and Jernigan families. Evie would have stopped at nothing to support her friends, protect her loved ones, and help those in need. If you're fascinated by Unsolved Mysteries and enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to stay updated on all our latest content. Moving on to the next mystery. A mysterious photograph is this one that was sent to me. The person said that their nun captured a strange craft in the sky and said that after reviewing the photographs, it looked like a black triangle. This one is of particular interest because rarely do you see a black triangle in the daytime. Usually, these crafts are seen during the night standing up because of the 3 lights they give off. Black triangle UFOs are a type of craft that have been seen in our sky for years now. And although we have various videos and photographs of them, there's still many unanswered questions. The man who sent the photograph was Aaron, and he said the following. My Nance sent me these photographs while I was away. She lives in Portsmouth, which is located in the south of England. She told me the photos were taken a few seconds apart, but she couldn't understand what she had captured. After reviewing the photos, I couldn't work out what the object was. I asked her if she saw or heard anything, and she said no. After doing some research, I found out that triangular crafts were a common occurrence in the south of England. This is the only thing I could think it was, as I've never seen any military crafts that look like this." End quote. The message ended with him saying that he doesn't want any attention, but just wants to know what his NN captured. It's still one of the best and clearest images we have of one of these elusive black triangles. Though triangle UFO sightings are common, those who witness the crafts often report them as having similar features. Triangle UFOs often said to be completely silent, making no noise whatsoever as they hover above, leaving behind no signs of contrails. The cross also usually reported as being around the size of a football field and dark in color. UFOs are largely referred to and depicted as flying saucers. But given the wide variety of reports over the years, triangular-shaped cross seem to be one of the more common shapes that are witnessed. David Mahler, UFO researcher and author of Triangle UFOs, claims to have researched over 17,000 UFO sightings that involve triangular-shaped graphs, often referred to as black triangles. While these types of UFOs are often associated with otherworldly visitors, there are some that speculate the earthly origins. Secret government projects have been going on for years. And while we don't know the extent or scale of these projects, it's entirely possible that these are human in origin and are used as surveillance technology or as an experimental aircraft. Another strange photograph that got people talking was one that was captured on the surface of Mars. The photograph was taken by a camera on the Curiosity rover where scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California began to investigate the mysterious light. According to NASA, the bright light appears in only one of the images and not any of the others. Justin Mackey, a NASA imaging scientist, said the following about the image. One possibility is that the light is the glint from a rock surface reflecting the sun. When these images were taken each day, the sun was in the same direction as the bright spot, west-northwest from the rover and relatively low in the sky. We think it's either a vent hole or a glinty rock. End quote. Not everyone bought this idea though, saying that this is just a theory and as of right now, it hasn't been confirmed. There are some who said the image could be proof of alien life on the planet, and even that of an unidentified flying object. However, after weighing these considerations, scientists concluded that implying that it is alien life is probably not the wisest course of action. An additional theory is that it might have been a subatomic particle that collided with the camera and left its energy trail behind. The nature of the enigmatic light is still unknown, despite the numerous hypotheses that have been proposed to try to explain it. Moving on to the next mystery. According to a retired Air Force colonel, he believes the public should be aware of fresh evidence he has. He claimed to have proof, along with numerous others, that something came to visit us in 1980. Above the UK's Bentwaters Royal Air Force Base, a strange UFO was spotted. Knowing what he saw, Colonel Charles Holt began gathering sworn testimony from air traffic controllers, tower watchmen, and other people who were present at the base at the time. He was informed by everyone he spoke to that they had observed and tracked an unknown flying object that had entered the area, noting that it was making amazing aerial maneuvers. However, they were afraid to come out with their assertion, so they kept it to themselves until the day they retired. On December 27th back in 1980, mysterious lights were seen by military personnel in the Rendlesham Forest. Various RF personnel said they saw fast lights flying through the forest and above the base with other members, saying that when they went to investigate what was going on, they saw a triangular craft land within a clearing. This wouldn't be the end of the sighting, however, as on the second night, the mysterious lights would return, which caused Deputy Base Commander Holt to lead a group into the forest. While there, he and others would see the mysterious craft themselves. This then led to Holt going around investigating what had happened, talking to other personnel to try and find out what they had witnessed. He made a tape recording during the event but also filed a report where he described a laser beam was coming from the craft. He said the following in the report: early in the morning of December 27, 80, approximately 3 o'clock hours, 2 unidentified States Air Force Security Police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate to RAF Woodbridge. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately 4 hours near the back gate. The next day, 3 depressions 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, December 27, 80, the area was checked for radiation. Beta-gamma readings of 0.1 millirangens were recorded with peak readings in the 3 depressions near the center of the triangle formed by the depressions. A nearby tree had moderate 0.5 to 0.7 readings on the side of the tree towards the depressions. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved around and paused. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were above 100 degrees of the horizon. The object moved rapidly in sharp angular movements and displayed red, green, and blue lines. The object to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned to full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 or 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned witness to activities in paragraphs 23, signed Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, United States Air Force Deputy Base Commander. Lieutenant Colonel Holt also went on to talk with the Huffington Post and detailed that what he and others saw is definitely under intelligent control. Going on to say the following: the military has nothing to do with it other than the cover-up, but I can tell you there is some type of superintelligence that can change size, change shape, and do funny things. What I saw and firmly convinced didn't have anything we know or can relate to inside it. Maybe they're not a being as we know. Maybe they're an entity that just has intelligence, and we just can't relate to it." End quote. Holt went on to say that he gathered sworn statements by those who'd witnessed the event. Going on to say the following: they saw the object go across their scope. A 60-mile scope in 2 or 3 seconds, thousands of miles per hour. It came back across their scope again. Stop near the water tower. They observed it. They watched it go over the forest where we were. He went on to detail that the government covers up these types of stories and says that there's a top-secret agency that controls everything to do this subject, including extraterrestrial visits to Earth, saying the following: there is a contract civilian agency that's fed information that is controlling everything. It's made up of either former military, high-level government agencies, or high-ranking, very knowledgeable scientists. I can almost guarantee you that's how we do it, and the biggest thing is disinformation, the quote concludes. Holt says that many files have disappeared over the years and that people have been encouraged to stay quiet about the Bentwaters tragedy, which has left him extremely dissatisfied and unhappy. The records that describe the Rendlesham Forest incident were not included in the thousands of secret UFO documents that the UK made public in 2011. I don't find it surprising that Hulse mentioned this because they were most likely stolen from them by someone or sent somewhere on instructions. That's how it works. I promise. On the one hand, it is alarming, and on the other, it is really frustrating. What else might be happening? Moving on to the next mystery. A new species of electric eel found in the waters of the Amazon basin. Numerous odd and amazing creatures can be found in the Amazon. However, this new eel species found in the Amazon basin is more frightful than adorable. This organism, known biologically as Electrophes voltais, is known as the most potent electric eel on the globe and can shock a human with 850 volts. Prior to this discovery, the most potent electric eel was capable of shocking its victims with 650 volts. For a frame of reference, the human body often fails to withstand a 200-volt shock, and defibrillators often range between 200 and 1000 volts. David DeSantana, lead researcher of the project at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, explains how these eels can easily grow up to 8 feet long. He continues to explain that for such a large creature to remain undetected for 250 years of active searching, there must be multitudes of species we simply don't know exist in the Amazon. We are currently aware of 250 species of fish that can produce electricity in South America alone. Electric eels, which are in fact fish that simply resemble an eel's appearance, are the only fish that actively hunt and defend themselves with their electricity. The others reserve their electricity to communicate and navigate, an ability the electric eel also takes advantage of. The collaboration between DeSantana's Smithsonian team and researchers from the University of São Paulo Museum of Zoology has begun to aid investigations into the diversity of eels and electric fish in South America. The 850-volt Electrophorus volta eel may have been the star of the show living in the south of the Brazilian Shield, but another species of electric eel, Electrophorus varii, has been found too swimming in murky lowland waters compared to Electrophorus voltai's preferred island region. This research has also refined existing knowledge, confirming that the Electrophorus electricus remains only in the island Guiana Shield despite previous assumptions of the eel being distributed throughout South America. DeSantana conducted genetic analyses on the two eel groups, revealing that their evolutionary differences appear to have begun several 1 million years ago, believed to be 3,600,000 years ago. The high voltage has been explained to be a result of an evolutionary adaptation to highland waters having a low conductivity. This wide difference in their evolution means their means to conduct electricity, referred to as electrogenesis, may never have been studied before. DeSantana explains that a possible different use of enzymes and various compounds may present us with an opportunity for medicinal advancements and new technology. The Amazon's ancient civilizations have long been a subject of intense inquiry, but retaining these societies in our studies can only deepen our comprehension of how humans shaped the region as it exists today. There must be more creatures and plants buried within the 5,500,000 square kilometers of woods and rivers in this home of over 10 million species that we haven't yet discovered. Moving on to the next mystery. Harriet Buswell, 27, was remembered by friends and acquaintances as a bright and charming young woman with one child. She had a remarkable ability to give her full attention to anyone she spoke with, making it easy for her to form connections quickly. Despite her warmth and charisma, Harriet's life was not without struggles. As a single mother to an 8-year-old, she faced challenges in finding stable employment, and making ends meet. To make ends meet, Harriet often turned to prostitution as her primary source of income to pay for rent and provide food for her child. On Christmas Eve, December 18, 1972, she likely went to the Alhambra Theater in an effort to earn more money to cover her expenses, including debts to her childminder and her doctor. After dining with an unidentified man at the theater, they stopped at a greengrocer on their way home to purchase almonds, apples, and oranges. The landlady let them in when they got to the 27-year-old's boarding house on Curran Street. While Harriet stayed downstairs and had a drink with her landlady before joining her guests, the man went directly upstairs. The next day, Harriet stayed in her room all day. Her landlady went to check on her out of concern, but no one answered and the door was closed. The landlady, growing increasingly alarmed, had the door broken down, only to be confronted with a horrific scene that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Harriet was found in her bed, surrounded by blood-stained sheets. She had 2 cuts on her throat, one to the left of her windpipe and another beneath her left ear. A bloody fingerprint was visible on her forehead. The brutality of the crime shocked the police when they arrived, but they immediately began their investigation. Despite the violent nature of her murder, it was noted that the 27-year-old's face appeared eerily calm. They also observed that her pajamas had not been tampered with. The fact that Harriet's door was locked from the outside and that no key was visible suggests that the burglar may have taken it with him when he fled. Still, there wasn't any blood close to the door. Witnesses claimed to have heard the man walk away at 6:30 that morning. The crime scene contained a number of tangible pieces of evidence. Near the sink, a bloody towel was found, indicating that the murderer had likely cleaned his hands and possibly the weapon before fleeing the scene. On the bedside table was an apple with a single bite taken out of it, yet Harriet's autopsy revealed no trace of the apple in her stomach. The disappearance of Harriet's pocketbook, some jewelry, and a pawn ticket from her room led authorities to suspect that robbery was the motive. After speaking with witnesses, detectives began to piece together a profile of the suspect. The man Harriet had brought home was identified by onlookers as a foreigner, probably German. A bystander described the man as a rough-looking laborer and detailed his attire in considerable detail. Police were unable to locate the man who was seen with Harriet that evening, even though a number of witnesses came forward in the case. In addition to reviewing all of the 27-year-old's communications, they also conducted conversations with everyone she had contact with in the years prior to the murder, as well as at the time of the murder. The government offered a £200 prize for information leading to an arrest and conviction, but no leads were successfully produced by this incentive. It's unclear whether the knife that police believed to be the murder weapon was ever definitively verified, although one was discovered during the initial investigation. During the probe, police also received letters from Ryder, expressing concerns about suspicious foreigners from across Europe. Despite investigating these leads, none proved fruitful. The media referred to Harriet's case as the Great Coram Street Murder. Then, on January 18, 1973, a suspect was taken into custody. Utilizing the testimonies of the greengrocer who had served Harriet and her companion on the night of her murder, as well as the waiter who had previously served her at the theater, investigators located a clergyman named Henry James Bernard Hessel, who was en route to South America along with a group of German immigrants. Both witnesses were able to positively identify the doctor as the man who had been seen with Harriet on Christmas Eve. According to reports, the doctor had arrived in London the night of the crime after his ship had halted in Ramsgate, Kent, for repairs. His defense attorney contended in court that Dr. Hessel was unwell in bed, citing the fact that his boots had been left outside his door the entire night, and that other witnesses could attest to his account. The populace felt differently, even if the authorities thought this might be their man. Dr. Hessel was a married, well-educated, and soft-spoken preacher, qualities that led people to believe he was a respected member of their community. Public perception remained largely unchanged, even when, a few days after the murder, a maid came forward with a troubling account. She revealed that Dr. Hessel's wife had given her 3 bloody handkerchiefs to wash, one of which was nearly soaked in blood. The maid also mentioned that the doctor had requested turpentine and a clothes brush the day he returned from London. He did fight in court, but it was only because he had painted his wife's clothes by mistake. In the end, the magistrate released Dr. Hessel, who was adamant about his innocence and moral integrity. The doctor was a ship's chaplain, as it has come to light in more recent decades when his flock expelled him due to alcoholism and mounting debt. Despite the fact that none of this turned him into a murderer, it undoubtedly damaged his reputation as a respectable citizen. It appears likely that he would have faced far greater scrutiny if this information had been known in the 1870s. Harriet's brother claimed her body and arranged for her burial, though the exact details remain unknown. Additionally, the fate of her 8-year-old daughter is unclear. In the years following Dr. Hessel's release, authorities made several unsuccessful attempts to solve the case and bring closure. The murder of Harriet remains unsolved, as the case was never officially closed. Moving on to the next mystery. The government should share all it knows about UFOs and aliens, according to a former Canadian defense minister who claimed that the most powerful people in the world were hiding the presence of aliens. Paul Hellier's background is excellent. In the 1960s, he was Canada's Minister of Defense. He managed the significant transformations that led to the eventual unification of the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Navy. However, he has been in the mainstream media because of his recent remarks. Mr. Hellier started to make comments on unidentified flying objects around 2015, where he stated that these crafts are just as common as planes, going on to say that aliens have been visiting Earth for many years now, and the reason they started to take an interest in us is because of the atomic bomb. Many UFO researchers have said that when the first atomic weapons were being tested, there was a huge increase in UFO sightings. Mr. Hellier, along with those who researched the phenomena, explained that when aliens saw what we were doing with atomic bombs, we suddenly became a great threat to the cosmos. In an interview with Russia Today, he said the following: "The reason for this was that man was stupid enough to invent the atomic bomb. Aliens are frightened that we're going to use it again and again, and this will affect the whole balance of the cosmos." End quote. Mr. Hellier suggested that various people who worked for the United States government know what's going on, and even said that when you're put in contact with the correct people, it doesn't take long for you to get the proof. He explained that the documents he's received and the people he's talked to have told him there's between 212 different alien species. And one of the reasons why people don't know about this is because the majority of them look like us. This is in line with what people have said in the past. In fact, according to the Mutual UFO Network, the second most commonly reported alien is nearly completely identical to human beings in almost every way except for a few key differences. Referred to by Mathon as the Nordic alien species, the Nordic aliens are reportedly aliens that have long blonde hair. So blonde is commonly mistaken as being white, pale skin, deep blue eyes, and stand between 6 to 7 feet tall. The first ever reported encounter with the Nordic aliens was made back during the 1950s by a man named George Adamski, of whom would later go on to be one of the most famous ufologists, and finish a book titled Flying Saucers Have Landed, and Inside the Space Shims that would feature in-depth descriptions of his encounters throughout the 1950s. Many of those that have claimed to have encountered the Nordic aliens or have been abducted by the species claim that the Nordic aliens possess advanced telepathic abilities, able to communicate entire concepts and emotions with their abductees, and instill them with a tremendous amount of new information. Although many claim that the species is benevolent in nature, with some claiming that the Nordic aliens are preparing to save the human race for abduction in the event of a world-changing catastrophe, there appears to be a number of doomsday cults that worship the Nordic aliens in sinister ways. Killia's main message, though, is that these aliens have the knowledge to change our planet and that when the time comes, he thinks they will step in and make the world greener. He said that higher officials told him this has to be done in the right way, otherwise people won't get on board, saying that information occasionally gets leaked to the public, and this is in order to get them accustomed to the idea. Many members of the alien community have speculated that perhaps the main cause for the government's continued overall lack of transparency regarding the existence of extraterrestrial visitors is due to an old report provided by the Central Intelligence Agency's Psychological Strategy Board that concluded that the public's potential reaction to unidentified flying objects could be constituted as a threat to national security. Interestingly, this appears to not be the case in recent years. The 1950s was a long time ago, and since then, the idea of extraterrestrial visitation has been welcomed with open arms by the public and the normalizations of such alien imagery via science fiction movies. Popular comics and worldwide media has played a tremendous role in this explosion of extraterrestrial fascination. Given recent findings by programs such as the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, it's said that the very existence of the unidentified flying objects is already a national security threat. This has caused some to be torn, saying if these objects were really a threat, then surely they would have done something by now. These talking points make for interesting discussions, but unfortunately, as of right now, many don't buy the idea that aliens are walking among us. Scientists, researchers, and organizations like NASA have said we've never found proof of alien life. On the other hand, the UFO community thinks that we have been visited and that the truth will eventually surface, asking why our governments would launch several UFO projects and invest $1 billion if they didn't exist. They claim that something must be happening in order for them to be able to defend investing so much time and money. Intriguingly, it was also revealed that the president's signing of the $2.3 trillion government financial relief law in December also marked the beginning of another project. On that date, U.S. intelligence services have only 180 days to make public all of the information they have on UFOs, a topic that has been in the news recently. The Secretary and Director of National Intelligence are expected to be placed on the spot and will now be required to provide all of their knowledge of these unidentifiable crafts. Moving on to the next mystery. Due in large part to the fact that many areas of our oceans remain uncharted, they are among the most fascinating locations on Earth. As a result, there are countless items beneath them that haven't been seen by humans in 100 or 1,000 years. We've had to reconsider our history and the abilities of our ancestors as a result of various archaeological finds beneath our waters. In addition to demonstrating that we still have a lot to learn, the discovery of several ancient cities beneath the waves also shows that entire civilizations could be wiped out. This odd item that seems to be moving beneath the ocean floor is the most recent finding made using NASA's satellite. Interestingly, a similar object was found a while back, but this one appears to have turned around 90 degrees on the sea floor. Taking measurements will show you that this structure is massive. It measures in at 21.45 kilometers or 13.3 miles in length. What people can't seem to explain though is how such a large object is able to do a 90-degree turn. Not only that, but it's also gone on to travel for a few miles after this. Some UFO believers also find it interesting that at the end of this trail, you can see what looks like a disc. This shape is synonymous with UFOs being one of the most commonly shaped UFOs out there. One believer said the following: "This photograph is interesting because not only can we see what looks like a massive skid mark, but we can also see what appears to be a UFO at the end. Or should I say a USO? These USOs are not as common as UFOs, but there's debate within the community whether these types of crafts are the same. UFOs are seen around large bodies of water, and USOs have been reported on a number of occasions coming out of the ocean. So some researchers have said that UFOs have the ability to go in and out of the water, or some think that the two are different." End quote. It's interesting to see an object at the end of what appears to be a skid mark. Normally, these features don't have anything at the end. And when first viewing this photograph, it does look like this object could have caused a large skid mark behind it. What's strange about this, though, is that those who've seen the images have also noticed that the areas above and below the structure look to be blurred out, saying that is it possible that NASA have gone in and done this themselves? It's known that NASA touch up or edit photographs before they're released to the public. This could be because when we're talking about Google Earth, certain regions need to be blurred out for security reasons. There's a few places that you can't view due to them being top secret. This can include things like government buildings or top secret locations that are off limits to the public. But why then would they go out of their way to blur something in the ocean? Theorists who spend time looking at these images have given their ideas as to why they would do this. One person said the following: "It's strange when you find a structure of interest in the ocean only to find out that it's been blurred out. And isn't it a coincidence that it seems to be blurred out at the exact point where there seems to be something of interest? In terms of these objects, it's always blurred towards the top and bottom of the trails, meaning that we can't see if there's any more of these objects nearby. Various times NASA has been seen doing this, but all it does is make us question what they're trying to hide." End quote. This photograph also reminded some of the mysterious Baltic Sea anomaly that was discovered a few years back. The Baltic Sea anomaly has a 60-meter diameter and can be found lying on the floor of the northern Baltic Sea. It was discovered by Peter Lindberg, Dennis Asberg, and his Swedish Ocean X diving team, and this was back in June 2011. The team made this discovery while they were looking for an old shipwreck. As they passed over the objects, though, they received a mysterious reading. They'd never seen anything like this before and were very excited by what this object could potentially be. The group have described themselves as individuals who locate underwater treasures and bring it back to its former glory. They specifically specialize in underwater and historic artifacts. According to Ocean Eggs, the anomaly is around 3 to 4 meters thick and has an approximate diameter of 60 meters. Interestingly, this large object is said to be sitting on a thick 8-meter-tall pillar, and this can be found at around 85 to 90 meters. One thing the team have noted though is that the visibility is really bad. And although 90 meters doesn't sound deep, it's really hard to see anything when you're down there. The team reported that on one of their first expeditions, they started to experience some malfunctions in their equipment. They didn't think much of it, but as they passed the object, everything started to work as normal again. Thinking this was just a one-off, they then went back over the object, and once again, their equipment stopped working. This has caused the team to speculate that this object is giving off some kind of electromagnetic field. Additionally, they have tested this numerous times, and each time their equipment malfunctions. Anything electric out there and the satellite phone as well stopped working when we were above the object, professional diver Stefan Hagaborn stated. It switched on once again when we were about 200 meters away, then it stopped working as we passed the thing again. Moving on to the next mystery. Over the years, innumerable pictures have been taken. Some of these are inexplicable. Even yet, most of them describe aspects of our lives that we can comprehend. This purportedly haunting photo is one enigmatic image. Adam Lee, the head of a security company, received a notification that his motion sensor camera had detected movement at a Birmingham building site. He claimed that when he checked his laptop to see what the camera had captured, he was shocked to find an enigmatic woman dressed in white. A full patrol of the area was done in order to see if it was a break-in, but security guards reported that no one could be found in the area. There was no sign of any intruders. Mr. Lees, who is managing director of Lipmelo Securities, said the following: "I have no idea what it is, but it freaked me out for sure. We provide security for hundreds of building sites across the Midlands. If anything moves on our site, the camera takes a picture. It works on infrared and alerts one of our guards." The security guards went out straight away. It was within minutes, and there was no sign of anybody there or of anybody ever being there. It was really bizarre. I have no idea what it could have been, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and it gave me the shivers. That's for sure. I've never believed in ghosts, but I can't explain this. People have been saying it's fake, but I can assure them that it's 100% genuine, end quote. Some people have said this image shows the famous White Lady ghost, saying that this is one of the clearest images that's ever been taken of her. For those unaware, thousands of people have reported seeing strange sightings of a ghostly female figure with long black hair wearing a long white gown, with many different origin stories of the spirit featuring tragic tales. But all these spirits appear all across the world in many different countries, completely isolated from the myth all across history. This has led many to believe that a White Lady ghost, as the phenomenon has come to be called, can appear from almost anyone and will usually take the form when a woman undergoes a tragic event while remaining pure of heart. There have been a number of sightings of the White Lady ghosts across the Philippines. However, there's one story that stands out the most as it has become the most commonly told story surrounding the legends of the ghost and its behaviors in the country. According to urban legend, the spirit of the lady in white belonged to a long-haired woman who was wearing a white dress on her way to her wedding. Suddenly, as she was driving, her car began shaking, and she crashed at high speed, causing her to perish instantly. This has caused her spirit to be trapped in this area in a constant state of attempting to get to her wedding in time. This has left many taxi drivers scared of driving through this region at night. In fact, it's been told amongst the drivers that they're not to pick up anyone alongside certain regions at night, as it's usually the lady in white who will enter the back seat of the taxi and take on a more disgusting form. A form that's left many taxi drivers running from the car and abandoning their taxis entirely. Union Cemetery is another place where this mysterious entity is being seen. The graveyard has become infamous for sightings of a white lady spirit, which go back to at least the 1940s. The female ghost is said to have flowing black hair and be dressed in a long white gown or wedding dress. She walks the side of the cemetery at night, sometimes appearing on nearby roads. Ed Warren claimed to have captured definitive evidence of the White Lady ghost. Chillingly, several drivers have reported seeing the apparition suddenly appear in the middle of the road only to vanish on impact with their vehicle. The identity of the mysterious White Lady figure is not known. The Warrens believe that she was a young woman who passed away at childbirth. However, theories abound as to who she was in her time on Earth. One tale holds that she was a woman who passed away after slaying her husband. Another theory is that she was a young woman who lost her life at the turn of 20th century, whose body was later disposed of in a nearby sinkhole. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing unsolved mysteries with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Unsolved Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any mysteries you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video.